The reason we do that isn't necessarily because we want someone who we're mandating that it has to be a high school, college, or
Mm,
professional athlete. What we're saying is we're trying to attract people who understand how to win and
mm,
then understand that winning isn't done on game day. There's a process that builds up
right.
to game day. The best reps are the people who not only embrace that process, follow that process to put themselves in a position to win,
Mm.
but in that moment they can also execute and they have that winning gene. So we advertise and seek out those types of profiles in order to get those character traits which are transferable to winning business.
Welcome back to the Revenue Vault, the show where we dig into how modern sales leaders build scalable, high-performing teams that actually win. Hey, I'm Mark Shan, CEO of Venly and creator of the Revenue Engine OS. And around here, we go beyond buzzwords and impact the systems, standards, and habits that turn average teams into revenue machines. Today's guest is Evan Hudson. He's the president of Unishippers, the Hudson Group. Evan's built one of the top-performing franchises in the logistics industry by combining old-school grit with modern systems thinking. He's known for creating a culture where reps take full ownership at sourcing their own leads, closing their own deals, and learning to love the process that creates consistent success. In this episode, we get into the underrated skill every scalable sales org depends on, why hiring is a real growth constraint most leaders ignore, how to spot reps who can adapt coaching fast and those who can't, and how Evan uses culture and structure to make high standards feel empowering, not punishing. If you care about building a team that's accountable, disciplined, and built to scale, you're going to love this one. Evan, my man, pumped to have you on. What's
Excited to be here.
something that you think your peers often underestimate about building a scalable sales org?
I've had this conversation with a lot of other Unishippers offices and other people, and I think a lot of people don't understand the amount of hiring and the
Mm,
amount of new talent coming in. And you don't ever want to turn people over, obviously, if you don't have to. But every sales job's not a fit for everybody. So you have
mm,
to continue to hire, continue to find people who are the right fit. And then when someone's not a fit, it's mutually beneficial for that person to move on. But I think just continuing to hire and then having your standards where if someone's not meeting them, you have to be okay with moving on and just cutting bait on that and cutting your losses. So I think a lot of people hang on too long, and a lot of people don't understand the amount of the hiring that's required to grow.
I think you made a couple of really fantastic points, right? Because even the point of holding on someone too long, right? And for you, how do you determine like when it's time to like essentially cut your losses?
I mean, as a sales leader, you've probably experienced this. You've invested so much time into people and you want to see them succeed either personally or professionally. And you have some bias towards making sure that that person does well. But at the end of the day, if you come back to the idea that, okay, this job needs to be a great natural fit for this person, they need to be able
Mm,
to win. And if they're not winning, you're doing them a disservice by keeping them around because they could go do something else
mm,
which they're going to be really successful at, win, and have a much more enjoyable life. So I think in the beginning, I struggled to understand that keeping someone around and trying to like push someone across the finish line isn't necessarily helpful for you or for them.
mm. I think it's really interesting, right? Because you actually said the word, I like the term user, which is push them over the finish line, right? Which is like, and sometimes, like it could be, maybe it's skill thing, they don't have the skills. Sometimes it's a will thing where they just don't have that drive. In your experience, what have you kind of seen for the ones who don't really make it? Is it like a skill or will thing, or is it something else?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I mean,
Mm,
from the start, you have to have someone who has extremely high level of judgment. And what I mean by that is every company sells to a different target market. Every company sells to a different industry. So does that person communicate well to that industry, to those potential
mm,
clients? And do they have good judgment? I know we're probably going to talk a lot about leads and prospecting and all that, but I feel like a lot of people generate leads and try to find prospects that they're going to work on, but inherently they're just not the right people. And the
mm,
rep doesn't display the judgment that they need to be able to understand if this person is good for them, good for our business or not. Um, we'll go look at pipelines and, it'll be chock full of, 50, 60, 70 qualified people, but only 10 or 15 are actually the right people. So the
right.
judgment to understand who that is super important for us.
Mm. I think you bring up such an awesome point there where it's like, I think a lot of times, reps think I need more leads, I need more opportunities. But oftentimes it's like, man, like sometimes they're not even targeting right. Um, and for you, are you hoping they figure out how to target effectively and go after the right people, or is that something that you guys help with to help them kind of focus on like these are their best fit prospects?
Yeah, we train on
Mm,
it.
mm,
Our sales leaders, myself, will even get into the trenches and say, okay,
mm,
what's going on with this person? Let's go look at first who they're finding for leads, who they're finding for potential prospects, and then what are they doing once they have identified those people. So
mm,
from the beginning, let's say they're struggling to understand who a Unishippers customer is. You're going to spend time with that person. You're going to train that person on what it is and what an ideal customer is. But at the end of the day, it's up to them to take that training and then replicate
mm.
it over and over and over again.
Yeah,
If you have a person who's struggling to replicate and understand what you've taught them, that's the first sign. It's like, okay, this might not be a fit.
yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think I was talking to a really great leader, Meredith Chandler. She's over the head of sales over at a company called Aligned, and she talked about how critical it was for her to identify, even in the interview process, how fast can they adapt coaching? Like if she like coaches them on the spot right then, like can they move pretty quickly and like, okay, cool, Evan, let me try now and see how good I am. Versus are they like, oh, and they kind of struggle to kind of pick things up. Like that speed to learning and like application is like so vital. Now going to
I've
the
heard
other
you
piece.
talk about, sorry,
Go ahead.
I've heard you talk about this before about yourself. Like, I think you admittedly said you weren't necessarily a natural salesperson in the beginning, right?
No, not at all.
Right.
Not at
And I
all.
think that the shiny object that is like hiring, where you're like, oh, this person's a dynamic personality, this
Yeah.
person's super persuasive, when really it's the people who are intelligent and it can understand the process and then replicate the process over and over again are the
Mm,
ones who are usually the most successful. I think that's probably what happened to you,
mm,
right?
100%. And I think what's really interesting is you just said a couple things which I think is absolutely vital, which is that ability to be able to find people who can, understand like the overall process, and so they can like move pretty quickly, but also have a bias for action, right? And I
Hmm.
think that key to how that speed to bias for action is so critical, right? Because I was never that great when I started, especially, but I had a bias for action. Whatever I was told to do, I was like, let me just go try. I'm like, give me the ball, coach. Like, let me
Yeah.
go. I'm gonna mess up. I'm gonna fall on my face. I know I'm gonna do terrible. You're gonna laugh at me, but like, let me try as many times as possible because I think it's gonna help me long term wise. Now, how do you how do you find people like that? Because you actually hit the nail on the head, which is like finding people who can kind of do that, is part of the process. How do you do that in your process right now?
Yeah. So for us, I mean, we spend a lot of time trying to build our company image and culture on LinkedIn.
Mm,
We put a lot of time into that, and in our applications that, or in our job postings, things that we do, we say athletes wanted or certain profiles wanted. And the reason we do that isn't necessarily because we want someone who we're mandating that it has to be a high school, college, or
mm,
professional athlete. What we're saying is we're trying to attract people who understand how to win and
mm,
then understand that winning isn't done on game day. There's a process that builds up
right.
to game day. And the best reps are the people who not only embrace that process, follow that process to put themselves in a position to win,
Mm,
but then they're in that moment they can also execute and they have that winning gene. So we advertise and seek out those types of
mm.
profiles in order to get those character traits, which are transferable to just winning business.
I think I love that so much because I used to also also recruit a lot of former college athletes. Similar because I knew like they realized that they knew that the game was won, not on the field. It was won in practice. It was won in all the work leading up to it. It was won in that 99% of the time that no one's actually watching. And like,
Hmm.
that's when they actually win. So you're going after like, people like college athletes or people who understand the power of process already, because that's how they kind of grew up, which I think is awesome.
Hmm.
Um, Now here's the reality. It's kind of, I'm sure you've seen, there's like correlation causation, right? Like they can be a great college athlete. They can come in and still be horrible.
Yep, absolutely.
um, so once, let's say, you're a college athlete, they apply, you're interviewing them. Are there things you do in your interview process to hopefully kind of vet it out to increase your likelihood they're going to be a good fit overall long term wise?
Yeah, I mean, so we have what most would consider a faster interview process,
Mm,
but with a more selective mentality.
mm,
So when we have our initial screenings, we have our great recruiting team that's doing a fantastic job of just vetting out those people who aren't like-minded, people
mm,
who don't have that mentality, don't have that history of winning. But as they go through our interview process, we're learning, okay, what's their makeup? What's
mm.
their background from a friend level, from a family level? Who are they in their circle of friends to be able to understand the role they play with interpersonal dynamics? What have they won in the past? How have they won? What was the process to that winning? And then, really, honestly, like how they go about their daily life now. We all have been around athletes or high level performers. It could be music. Do you have someone who's crazy, naturally talented, who can just roll out of bed and perform? Or we all have people who are process driven and grinders who've made more of their talent than other people. And we tend to do better with people who understand that it takes that hard work and grind. The people who just want to show up on game day tend to fizzle out pretty quickly.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like a quote I learned from a long time ago from a great coach. And it talks a lot about the power of practice. He says, amateurs they play more than they practice, but pros practice more than they play.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
found it to be so true, right? It's like the Kobe Bryant's who's like, shooting like 500 free throws before anyone's at the practice, right? It's the Michael Phelps who trains 7 days a week when his competitors only train six, right? There's a level of intensity to be the ultimate in whatever you focus on, which I think is absolutely incredible. Now, I think another interesting thing you mentioned is, even with, Unishippers, the industry is an older industry.
Hmm.
Yeah, what I think is really cool is you're talking about using LinkedIn, social media to like bring in like clients and prospects to also like potential candidates. Uh, what caused that shift to get for your company to kind of start targeting and doing that as a way to bring those type of leads in?
I think to understand the evolution of what's happened over the last 5 years for us, and again, we'll talk about this, but we've discussed like each office is independently owned and operated. We had a physical office where we had all of our reps in house and coming to work every day. When COVID hit, we all went home. We all started working remotely, and then we never went back because we had success. The people who were here thought it was a better quality of life, so it then opened up this opportunity for us to recruit nationwide. Um, so for us, I think like actually, could you repeat the question? I want to get the whole thing.
Yeah, I just want like because I think it's well, I think you actually bring up a couple points here, which is you're in a historically this industry's been around for a
Oh, the
long
industry.
time, right?
Yep.
It's kind of stuck in the kind of old ways of thinking for a lot of ways from marketing, recruiting, etc. But you are approaching it very much in a very modern way, from generating leads to also attracting talent by using social media. What got you guys to that journey to that point?
Okay. Yep. So I think for us, it was an understanding that buying behavior is changing.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is like if do you own a home right now?
I do own them, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You need to replace your deck.
Mm.
What's the first thing that you're going to do to find someone to replace your deck? You're most likely going to
Mm.
text friends and family and say, "Does anybody know a deck guy?"
That's
You
right.
know, and so the relationship and the credibility is that's a buying behavior that's developing more and more. So for us, cold outreach is something we still do. It's something we still thrive with, but it's only one part of the strategy that needs to be there. We also need to be able to build credibility when someone says, "Hey, who is this Unishippers people? Are these Unishippers people calling us? Who are these people emailing us? Here's their LinkedIn page. This is what they're about. This is who they have employed for them. These are the types of customers they work with. This is who they are and how they represent themselves." So it's a it's an understanding that globally you need to have a presence in the market so your customers and prospects know who you are and what you're about, and are you the right people that they want to partner with. And then from a talent level standpoint, there's a lot of talk about culture. There's a lot of talk about workplace environment, and we've gone through those different evolutions of like, what does that really mean for us? I think we've come to the realization that culture really is and should be, are you a place where people can develop their skills? Are you a place where people can become the best version of themselves?
Mm.
And then do you have a vehicle or a mechanism to be able to help them make money and be successful in sales to either stay with you long term or we're super happy for them if they go get another job that's a higher level, and then they blow out the competition.
I love the bigger picture way I think you're talking about here, right? Because you're talking about, I mean, you dropped a lot of bombs there from evolving as a business, right? From that in-person only local marketing to like expanding, nationwide, to making sure you're bringing the right people in, to also being 100% comfortable with developing them to the point where if maybe they've outgrown the organization, that's okay. But you had a
Yep.
hand in their journey to get to that point, which I think is amazing. I want to double down on, the lead piece, right? So just so the listeners have an understanding, what's kind of lead process from like lead to close in your current organization?
Every single rep that works for every organization will complain about leads, right? That's what they
Of
do.
course.
That's the MO.
That's right.
So I think we've gone back and forth on a couple of different models, and we've tried and
Mhm.
experimented with a few things. I think what works for us, and this isn't what works for everybody. I think what works for us is that when your people are finding their own leads and they're investing time and energy into discovering the prospects they want to work on, their extreme ownership of what the outcome is going to be with that lead, through conversion, through bringing on that client, through a successful setup to maintaining that client, goes up exponentially.
Hmm.
Um, we've tried before, and maybe we're just not good enough at this, but we've tried like the appointment setting, the BDR model, the account executive model, all of that. And what we've always felt is there's a dilution of quality throughout each stage. And for us, it's just never worked that well. So our reps find their leads. They
Hmm.
this is what I want to go hunt. This is what I want to kill today. They go make those phone calls, those emails, those connections. They go execute, and then they see it all the way through. So for us, that's worked really well. Do you think there's any reason why certain businesses thrive with the I guess we'll call it like layered model versus a vertical sales process?
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting, right? Because I believe both can work if structured properly. Um, but I would say, generally speaking, whenever you have like the outsource, not outsource, the BDR team that's doing outbound, booking meetings, and you have the AE or account executives who are basically running the deal to close. Usually they're optimizing for different things. One is like get as many meetings as possible, which can be good or bad, right?
Yep.
And obviously it's always the hope that you have a really qualified opportunity. And the other, which is like, let me close those opportunities, right? So they're both equally good, right? You need both, but it has to be done really, really well. You need a lot of constraints in place, and like to make it be effective. Um, when I take a step back and I think about what's best for the prospect, in my opinion, it's a full cycle rep, just like how you guys are doing.
Yep.
I think that is absolutely vital because I think about myself as a prospect. It's happened to me. I'll talk to a BDR, they'll book a meeting with me, and I'll just share a lot of information with them up front, and then of course 9.9 out of 10 times that information never gets translated or transferred over to that next person. They don't look at the notes, or not, the notes are not in there. They're not prepared, and then like it feels like you're just like wasting my time's getting wasted as a prospect.
Right.
Versus there's a bit of that, when you do lead to close, you control all the way through. Now, it's because it sounds like you guys also then your reps and hold on to the opportunities and basically manage them and grow them as well. Is that part of the model you guys have?
Yeah, I mean, we have probably one of the best customer service teams
Yep.
in the organization
Yep.
nationwide.
Amazing.
And honestly, I would say like in the industry, if
Uh,
someone was going to ask me like, "Hey, why are you guys so successful?" I think it's a lot about our back end people,
mm,
because we can go find these clients, we can go win these clients, we can
yeah,
go do everything that we need. If you're not retaining them,
that's right.
what does it matter?
100%.
Um, so for us, like the way our org is set up is that these people go win these clients. They see them through the setup. They do some, second week follow up, first month follow up. But from that point forward, our customer service people are so good.
Mm.
They're dealing with it, and our reps only get pulled in to solve strategic problems with an existing client, rather than being inundated with all the daily minutia, which slows them down from hunting and finding new clients.
Beautiful. So the CS team takes over, and then does the CS team, do they also grow the account too as part of it, or is it just they're just kind of just making sure they're happy?
I'm happy and paying attention to growth opportunities. This is one thing as we're continuing to scale that we're going to be talking about more and expanding on more. There's other offices who do a great job with, your traditional account manager
Mm,
who's going to be farming and growing. That's not something that we've gotten to the point where we're doing really effectively. So that's definitely an area of opportunity that we're
mm,
going to be looking at. But we know it's there.
yeah,
It's just, you've been in sales organizations for a long time. It takes time to work through that process where
100%.
you're not going to hire account managers until you need to. You
Yeah,
got to grow it to a certain size where they're super
100%.
valuable.
Yeah, 100%. I think, and I think it's what happens is when orgs move too fast, they burn a lot of margin, right? Because then they're like
Yep.
hiring a bunch of people on the back end. There's ramp up time. They don't last, etc. Versus right now, the model you guys can run still is like you could still have the CS reps still just manage it, find the opportunities, tee it up, and then have the people who are already good at running the deal take over the bigger opportunities, right? To basically
Yep.
get to close, right? So, that's 100% how can be done. But even I'll tell you, even now, even I work for huge organizations, and we would actually do something similar where we had full cycle reps. It would get closed, and we had about 3 months to basically maximize the account as much as possible, and do a handoff to the account manager, and then the
Yep.
account manager then will be responsible for growing that account, and we had customer service reps who would manage all the servicing part with account managers who help to grow it. However, if the opportunity size of came about that was of like a certain magnitude, a certain size, that got then thrown back into the outbound reps because
That makes
typically
sense.
they were far more scaled and more complex deals. Because usually it's like it wasn't just like an increase or a slight growth. It was like, okay, we need to engage multiple stakeholders. It's a whole different division. It's basically a new opportunity again. We basically need to resell it again. Like
Yep.
So that was like we need the most skilled person to be in front of that opportunity at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, like you also know this: old habits die hard, right? So, like, if you've been
That's
running
right.
a sales organization for a long time, and you've had success without those people, and you're like struggling to understand
Yeah.
the metrics of how that person is effective, and you're then saying, okay, I have this much money this year to grow our team. You tend not to do those things because
Yeah.
you tend to stick to what's been working.
That's right.
Um, so it's a juggling act to be able to figure out, okay, for us, does this make sense, and what will we gain out of it?
100%. So speaking about that, what's maybe one challenge that you're working through with your sales org? If it doesn't get solved, I guess within the next 12 months, you're gonna be like kicking yourself, like, we should have figured this out.
It goes right back to hiring for us. I mean,
Mm,
like we probably turned down a lot of people that other people would be very excited about. And
mm,
I think for what in our industry, traditionally, we're competing against a lot of the players out there that are like payroll companies,
mm,
um, uh, uniform suppliers, things like that, where there's
mhm.
a lot of reps out in the field and they're knocking on doors and doing things, in a physical manner, meeting with customers face to face. For us, and the way we've gone to a remote role, and we have full cycle account executives, but we still are more of that like entry level to 1 to 5 years. We um, we have a group of people who are we have a pool that's not as big. So what I mean by that is like you could have a really talented sales rep that comes into the office and maybe they struggle with their self structure, but they're in the office and you can control them. When they're at home working remotely and they struggle with self structure, that's not someone that's going to be successful for us. So our talent pool gets whittled down a little bit from other companies and other organizations. So for us, hiring is a little bit more difficult, but when we hire the right people, we're really successful with it.
I love that so much, right? And have you found certain industries that kind of fit that mold you're looking for? Because you're spot on. Some of the other companies where they're primarily field teams, they're kind of
Mhm.
used to the in person versus like when you're remote. I mean, you hire a rookie out of college who's never done remote work before. Sometimes that can be a challenge because they don't know how to actually work quite yet. Um,
I would have been
what
the
is
worst
yeah,
remote rep at a school. Like I can tell you right
yeah,
now, I would have lasted maybe a month or two at a company if I was working remotely right out of school. So it takes a certain person. I
Yeah,
would have been
100%.
fired very quickly.
Well, I mean, I think about like, for a while, I mean, it's still quite popular now. There are the online only universities, right? And they usually had a very low success rate because it didn't, my theory was it just didn't require you going in person. So people just get like, they don't know how to be structured and whatnot and do all these things, right? They needed like to be in person for that forced structure. So I think it's really hard. Have you found other industries now that you're finding these gems that are, that can have that good balance of that almost entry level, but still be really successful in that, 1 to 5 year mark?
I wouldn't say there's like any silver bullet there. I
Yeah.
would say for us that, we're looking for people and we tend to do well with people who have natural instincts that are green and then we can teach. I don't want to say, people from other companies come over with bad habits. Sometimes that's the case.
Sometimes, yeah.
But for us, it's taking this blank canvas and
Hmm.
being able to mold it in the way that we want our process done, our mentality, which is a huge thing. We tend to do really well there. Sometimes people come over with great habits, and we're the industry or the process that
Yeah.
unlocks them. Sometimes they come over with bad habits where, they say, "Oh, my last company, I got leads, and I'm doing it myself," and
Mm,
they just naturally don't have an open mind to how that's more effective than what they were doing before. So I wouldn't say
mm,
there's like a silver bullet on industries.
mm,
I think you're just looking for people with a really strong winning mentality
yeah,
who understand that it takes a lot of self discipline.
mm,
You have to grind, and then just extreme sense of urgency to be able to bring these people in, meet with them, assess their needs, and
yeah.
close them.
So I think it'd be a great point, right? Like the example you mentioned where it's like, oh, you have a rep who that you like, they come in, they're like, oh, I don't want to self-source, like I'm used to getting leads, etc., or something like that, or some of these common excuses. What are some things you guys have started potentially doing your process to help vet those people out? So this way they don't even get hired because it's expensive to hire them, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think as a hiring process, we usually have multiple people. We have a recruiting team on that
Yeah.
interview, and then we have multiple sales leaders
Mhm.
on that interview.
Yeah.
We kind of have an agreement that if everyone doesn't feel like it's a hell yes to hire this person, it's a hell no, right? And we need to be extremely clear and not take chances where we shouldn't.
That's right.
And when I mean, you're going to make mistakes. You bring people
Totally.
in, you think it's a great fit, they think it's a great fit, and it ends up not being a great fit. Those are perfectly acceptable misses. But I think what happens is when you bring in the right people and you are patient enough to find those people and you watch them work, they immediately have success, and you're like, this is how it's supposed to be,
Yeah.
right? This is how it's supposed to look. This is what a talented person is capable of, and you just watch them flourish. And then you step back, you give them the tools to win and succeed. You don't micromanage them, and you let them be who they are, which is what makes them successful.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's key, right? But what I always worry about, Evan, is like, you bring someone in that everyone says that's a hell yes. This happened to me, by the way, many times. We're all hell yes. We're like, absolutely. Oh my gosh, Lisa's gonna be absolutely incredible. I mean, you bring them in, and it's just like a dumpster fire. Like they're like, oh
It's
man,
happened
like,
plenty of times.
Evan, like, oh, like I got leads before, for my company. They're all like all enriched. They're really warm, and like, oh, I had BDRs that book meetings for me. Like, so I think it's like that at that time it's tricky, right? It's almost like too late. Have you found anything in your current process now where you're like, cool, this is like how we start to vet them out beforehand, how we almost like disqualify them to not even make it in, even if everyone's like a hell yes.
Um, I think the improvements we've made isn't necessarily on the interviewing and hiring.
Mm,
It's what happens right after that. So let me give you an
mm,
example.
yeah,
Our process before was we would bring a person in and we would put them through a short boot camp with a sales leader, training them on how to do the job, product knowledge,
yeah,
things like that. One change that we made in the last year was we hired. Actually, it was one of our account executives who she's great, super devoted, great with people. She
mm,
has a natural instinct to want to teach. We made her a full-time sales trainer. Okay.
awesome.
So what she's doing now is we bring someone in, we put them through a boot camp. A sales leader doesn't touch them that new candidate or the new employee for about 2 weeks, and then she runs them through everything.
Mm,
So what you're doing is you're getting a data point from the recruiting process. You're getting a
mm,
data point from the training process. Then when the sales leader gets them and starts doing the work on a daily basis and executing the game plan after 2 weeks, let's say into like a month or two, you have a third data point. So what this has allowed us to do is say the recruiting, what was that like? The training, what was that like?
mm-hmm.
How they started the job, what was that like? If everything is lining up and looking like they're a quality employee, likely it's going to work out. If there's red flags along the way, then most likely you need to like check your ego at the door, be
Mm-hmm.
humble and say, this wasn't a good hire. We need to move on quickly.
Mm. Yeah, 100%. I think one thing, and maybe this will help as well, because, when I was scaling some pretty large orgs, and turnover is a growth killer, as you know. Like every time you
Yep.
turnover, it's like, oh, especially if you're like, it's called like, I mean, if you have like sub 20 total actual reps, every rep matters so much more, right? Like,
Yep.
once you get to like, like 50 plus reps and 100 plus reps, like, you have a little more like flex now, if you will. And sometimes I've found that like if we wait till they're actually hired, it could like totally screw us over, because I'm like, oh, the ramp time by the time they get producing and we invest all this time resources, it could be a whole thing. So what we started doing was, we started to analyze all the reasons why someone would leave, right? We
Hmm.
find those big reasons, and whatever it could be, right? What's a constant like thing? It's like, oh, they complained about the leave, which is like they don't know how to prospect, right? They don't know how to book their own meetings, right? They complained about maybe the hours or maybe the schedule or what's expected of them, right? So we actually started to reverse engineer that into our interviewing process. So we started to actually readjust how we did the interview process, the questions that we asked, the role plays we made them do in that process, so we could like fully vet them out. And that way, by the time we got to like huddling about the person, it's like, oh, we've looked at multiple aspects of why they would potentially quit. And people are like, pink flag, pink flag, pink flag. And we basically would just cut them out at that point, right? So just an idea that might be
Yep.
helpful. Like, okay, this way, before they get to that point, we don't waste any more time and resources into into someone we probably shouldn't have hired.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because like recruiting by nature is trying to get people to come work for you,
That's
right?
right.
So you have this like propensity to paint this picture with rose
That's
colored
right.
glasses, like,
That's right.
come work for us. It would be amazing.
That's
It's
right.
going to be great. And I think sometimes you fall into that trap. And there's a delicate balance between
100%.
being, giving them the ugly side of it, of like,
Yeah.
hey, this is how it could go.
That's right.
And this is what it could look like for you,
That's right.
versus just like trying to paint this like, gorgeous picture of what's going to like to work for us. They come and then they're like, this isn't what I thought. Right. So
100%.
there's a delicate balance between being real on what the opportunity
That's
is
right.
and how we operate, and making sure that they're not getting false expectations. And sometimes you go
100%.
too far in either direction. Sometimes
That's right.
you convince people not to work for you too much, and sometimes you convince people that it's going to be great and better than it really is.
That's right. You're so spot on, Evan. It's find that key balance, right? So I'll give you an example, right? So like, I built an org. I'm very process focused. I'm about structure and organization. So people are like, they know what's expected of them, so they know the bar is very high, and they have perform. I perform at the level, or they don't. And I was very
Hmm.
clear about that. So for example, like we had leaderboards for everything, and some people don't like that. They don't like leaderboards. They don't like rankings. They don't like scorecards, right? So like during the process, I would like literally, we had an interviewing binder. I had an iPad that like I built to show people like, hey, so like I was like, hey, like I would ask them like, do you feel comfortable getting ranked on a stack rankings report? And they're like, oh yeah, sure. And I pull out and show. I'm like, would you like, what do you think when you see this? And just get their instinct, right? Like some of them like, oh, geez, that's like, here's one, here's two, I see how many people hit President's Club. I see how many people qualify for the elite levels. And you could see on their face what they really liked. Or if it was like, maybe it's a schedule routine where it's like, hey, we're very disciplined as an organization for a reason. We're a top organization for a reason, like not by accident. It's all
Right.
engineered. This is the routine we expect from 8 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And we walk through step by step. Do you feel good with that? And some people are like, not at all.
Yep.
Great. But the people who are like, Evan, I love this. This is
Yep.
exactly what I'm looking for. It's like, great, you're my people. And I found that to be a
Yep.
really great balance. It's like, here's a greatness, here's a downside. Hey, yes, you can make $250,000 your first year, but if you don't perform, you're gonna make like nothing. Here's what the bottom looks like. are you going to be okay with that if you are the bottom? Well, I'm not going to be the bottom. I'm just making sure we're on the same page here. So your goal is to be at the top, get you to that point. But if you're at the bottom, what's going to happen? So intentionally, I'm like making sure they understand like what's going to be expected of them as part of the process. Now, speaking about a rep, right? Let's say you bring them in, right? They go through the boot camp. Everyone feels really good about this person overall. Fast forward 6 to 12 months, if that rep is behind quota, how do you determine what the root cause is? Is it them? Is it a process thing, structural issue? How do you determine that personally?
You owe it to the organization, you owe it to the person to go
Mm,
spend the time to find out. So someone's struggling and they're not where they need to be. I would do call blocks with them where I'm like, let me hear you talking to prospects.
love it.
I would do, hours of lead generation with them throughout the week. Show me how you're finding your leads, and how,
Mm,
and we talked about judgment, right? Show
mm-hmm.
me how you're finding your leads, and show me your judgment on who you're selecting to call that day. And you might find some things there and say, hey, look, this is not a big deal. You're not on the right stuff. The best salesperson in the world can't close these deals because it's not a fit for us. It's not our
Mm,
ideal customer. So let's fix that. Um, so then you get into the prospecting calls where you're understanding, okay, how are they talking to people? What's the messaging? Are they trying to find people who are the right fit? Cool, they're doing that. Then it might be you progress to the next stage, which is how are they running meetings? Are they
mm,
doing good discovery, or we call them assessments? Are they doing good assessment meetings where they're understanding in depth what the motivation of these people are, what they're trying to accomplish, how our service and our product aligns with that and helps them accomplish those
mm,
goals? If they're not, you make some adjustments there. And then it just, finally everything through
mm.
closing, implementation, and all that. Um, but I think what often you find is you get into the weeds with them
Yeah,
and you say, this is what you're struggling with. These are the adjustments you need to make. And then they have to decide. You can't make someone do something they don't want to do.
that's right.
And you can't make them believe in something they don't believe in.
Mm-hmm.
So if they take the coaching and do really well, they'll make the changes. Often what you see though is like it might happen for a couple of days. And then the next week it's the same conversation. And you're like, look, I don't know what it is about this role for you that's not a good fit anymore, but maybe it's time for you to move on to something you can be successful in, and then we'll go find someone who can
Mm,
take that spot and be successful. Again, you don't do people favors by keeping them around,
that's right.
making them 75% of the money they expected to make. It's
Mm,
not good for anybody.
that's right. Yeah, nobody wakes up and says, "I want to be mediocre." Right?
Yeah, it's not.
I'm a firm
It's not
believer in
how it
that. Right?
works.
Um, what I love about your approach, Evan, which is we're very similar, which is it's not like, hey, we're just going to blame them. It's like, let's go look at the facts first. Let me just get in
Yeah.
the weeds. Let me just see how they run each part of the process. Let's just see like what's really happening. Like, let's see what's happening in the kitchen. Okay. How's the meat being made? Okay. Like,
Yep.
what's going on? And I have found 99% of the time, it's a lot of like little things that they're just not doing right, especially if you set them up to begin with, like upfront really well. But when they get to that point where it's kind of like, hey, you know what? It's go time.
Yeah.
You have
I
to
mean,
train the tools, resources. It's time to go.
don't you feel like a lot of people, a lot of sales leaders will say, "Oh, this person's not a good rep," right? When I mean, don't you think the real question that you should always be asking yourself first is like, okay, what haven't I done to make this person successful?
That's right. That's always the first piece. Is I call it the MPE model, which is mirror first. You look in the mirror first. How did I do as a leader? Did I give them the training, the tools, the resources to be massively successful? That's number one.
Yep.
Most leaders is not it's like I didn't do that. That's reality. Then the P, what's the process? What
Mhm.
process do we have in place for them to be a high performer? Right? Like I think about like, because sometimes as an example, a lot of sales leaders are really ineffective with maybe their one-on-ones with their reps, helping them drive performance, or they're really ineffective with actually call reviews, or if their field reps get in the field with them, they're not doing it effectively, they're not coaching effectively, or it could be anything else. But those are some of these processes that are just kind of not being done properly as well, you know. But then there's times where it's like, hey, you've done everything right as a leader, you've done everything right as a process perspective. Now it's like on the employee. That's the E. It's
Yep.
like is it a can't do or won't do? And most of the time is it can't do or won't do. You know,
Mhm.
so if it's a can't do, that's okay. I can potentially coach you out of it so you start doing it. But if it's a won't, you're unwilling to do it. Now it's a different story. Now we're
Right.
talking about lack of coachability. We're talking about other core issues that might be potentially hindering their performance, right? But and I have found too, and I like your instinct towards like we do our best, kind of coach them up. If they don't make it, we're going to have to cut them eventually. That's better for them. It's also better for the overall team because I found
Absolutely.
when you keep those people on your team who are essentially hurting the team, they're actually your team's actually like saying, Evan, Marcus, what are you guys doing? Like, like Bob over there is not like he's not showing up, he's not doing the work, he doesn't care, he's not putting the effort in. Like they start to second guess you, and top performers hate to be around people like that. They hate it,
It's contagious,
It
you,
100% is. 100% is.
and everybody has these feelings where they're like, I don't know if I should cut this person. I don't know if this should be something we end. And then what you often find if you've done this long enough is you cut that person. And then about a week later, there's 3 or 4 people that come to you and be like, yeah, we knew they weren't going to make it.
Mhm.
Like we knew that they weren't going to
They
make it.
always
And
know. They
they
always
know
know.
their peers know probably
Yeah.
faster than management a lot of times. Right. So
100%.
yeah, you're doing everybody a favor, right? Like,
Mhm.
you feel bad that this person isn't employed anymore, that this
Yeah.
person doesn't have a job. But if you understand and take it from a perspective of, okay, we've now allowed this person to go do something that makes them happier and be more
Right.
successful in a different way. Maybe it'll take some time for them to find that, or maybe they'll might have to go through a little bit of hardship until they find their next role. But our role wasn't it, so we don't want to force that person into being in that role.
100%. One of the things I always did too for someone who's underperforming, and this is after we tried coach them, guide them, do all that stuff right. And it's like, yeah, you can do pips and all that stuff as well. But like a lot of times, even before it got to that point, if we tried already and they're just not performing, they're not happy. We know that
No.
it doesn't feel good to wake up like I'm at the bottom leaderboards. I suck at my job. I'm getting terrible results. That feels terrible. Like
Yeah.
I would actually like if it was in person, like rep. I'd take him out to coffee. It was virtual. I was like, let's just talk and hop on a call if we can, or if I fly into town and meet with them, and I would just say, hey, are you happy? And that's it. Like in a really soft way. It's like first like, oh yeah, Marcus, it's fine. Hey,
Yeah. Yeah, I
like
love the people and I
I
love
love
the
the
job.
people.
It's
Yeah.
like,
I'm like, no, let's just put that aside. Like, are you happy? And I just like stop talking, right? And
yep.
it's amazing. Like you let that silence kind of fill the room, and they're like, well, I'm struggling, and this is why, and I'm not happy. And sometimes like it's not about trying to sell them to leave. It's like they just start to realize like they're just not a good place to be. They're just not a good fit for the company.
Right.
It's like, and at that point, they're like, yeah, I think this is not a good fit. Like I've done my own business, same thing. It's like we'll just sit down. If they're not performing, and he's not performing. I sit down. It's the same thing, and like it gets to the point. It's like, hey, so like, well, what's going to change? And they're
Yeah.
like, and then sometimes they're like, I don't think anything's going to change. And it's like, hey, do you think it's possible? Maybe this is just not the right fit for you. And a lot of times they come
Yeah.
to their own conclusions, like, yeah, I think this is actually not the best fit. Like, and then it's kind of like, hey, there's a couple paths we can go from here. It's like number one, like, hey, like we can continue to try to fix this, but just be quite clear, like we're now going to be entering performance plan territory, and here's what that path looks like, and here's what it can end to in the worst case scenario. That's one path. Or number two, you can take full control and accountability, and you could choose a different path if you want. You can go after a different type of role, a different company, etc., and I'll help support you. We'll pay you out. We pay out 2 weeks and do your thing. Like it's totally fine. We'll end well. We'll be a reference for you for whatever you want. But like, which path do you want? And I found like
Yeah.
if they're like genuinely a good person overall, like they want to do well, it's just not a good fit for them. Maybe this wasn't a good hire. Or maybe it's our fault because we're not hiring the wrong person. They say, yeah, you know what? I think this is probably best to stay as my last day. Like if you could pay me out 2 weeks, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. They feel really good. Okay, and then it's like it ends so well because now they're
Yeah.
like, hey, you treat me with respect and kindness versus like shove me into a performance plan for the next couple of months, and then you're feeling terrible, right? You feel terrible as a leader. They feel terrible as a leader or as a rep. It's not good at all.
No, definitely destructive. And I think like a lot of sales leaders and I talked about culture before. Remember that like whole phase of culture where it's like, oh, we have ping pong and beer on tap,
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
that was like a very common culture conversation.
Oh yeah,
And I think like real culture is sales leaders and employees understand when you're invested in them individually as human beings and as employees.
that's right.
So like some of the people that have worked for me that have left after a couple years, I'll shoot them a text, like 60, 90 days later and be like, hey, how's the new role?
Love
Like
that.
I was just thinking this one guy that worked for me, texted him like, how's the new role? He's like, oh, I'm killing it. Like we were his first job.
Mm,
And he texted me back saying basically, like, everything you guys taught me, I'm killing my peers.
mm,
And like, I felt like it was really hard and you guys were pushing me really hard, but that just made this role that I'm in now so much easier and so much more. My goals are so much more attainable, and like
mm,
at a much better point. So for me as a sales leader, it's not always just like that. It's like it's thinking about that guy. It's like, okay, great. I gave him the opportunity. I shouldn't say I gave him. I created an
mhm,
opportunity, and he took the reins to be able to become a really great sales professional, and that's going to affect his entire career.
mm. I think it's really powerful, Evan, is that's real culture, right?
Right.
Like that's the exactly what you mentioned. Like this guy remembers and he's thankful. And maybe it's like, yes, sometimes I think about even like I grew up playing sports, right? My
Yep.
toughest coaches who pushed me and had me do things that made me uncomfortable, but they knew it was good for me. Years later, I'm thanking them. Like I'm so
Yep.
grateful, right? And maybe you don't realize it in the moment, but later on, you're like, wow. In comparison, these other companies, like they were really well dialed. That was a really great leader. They made me a lot better, right? And I think it's really powerful. That's a great example right there. Now, if Evan, people want to find out more about you, they want to come work for you, where can they find and get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, we're doing a lot of work on LinkedIn. It's Unishippers dash Hudson Group, and that's just my family's unit of the business, where it's a national franchise organization. But for us, we're just really taking the reins on bringing in really talented people, having people understand who we are, our values, our culture, like we talked about, and the prospects that we help and the businesses that we help. So LinkedIn, Unishippers Hudson Group. There's a lot of information about us, a lot of information about our employees, what we do. You can learn a lot. And just know if there's anybody out there in a role right now where the industry is not going that well, you talked about shipping as an old school industry. It just chugs along and gets going and going and going. If you're in an industry that has too many ups and downs and want something a little bit more stable where you can thrive and have a little bit more autonomy, come talk to us. We'd love to have you.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Revenue Vault. Now, if you got value, here's your next step. Go to venleyconsulting.com/teams to get a free performance scan of your sales org. We'll show exactly where deals are stalled and how to actually fix it. And if this episode gave you even one insight worth sharing, send it to a sales leader you respect. I'm Marcus Shan. Thanks for being in the room.